Alright, this is going to be on lesson 1 of Unit 5. Organisms are adapted to their environment. This whole lesson is talking about how things animals have adaptations for where they live. So at the beginning it talks about, this is more just thinking of things yourself and describing conditions where the emperor penguins live and where the roadrunners live. And so things and then describing characteristics of plants or animals that would help you survive in these environments. And so things you should be thinking about is, obviously the emperor penguin environment is really cold. So you're gonna have to be able to stay warm. You're gonna be able to have to find food, things like that. And over here is a desert environment, so you'd have to be able to cool off easily. You need to, maybe finding food isn't as big of a deal because it looks like there's a lot of dead grass, so there's probably lots of plant life that's growing. But if there's a lot of food available, then there's probably more animals available, so maybe you'd have to be more worried about predators or something like that. Analyzing factors that determine climate. So I'm going to have to fill this out because I did this once and it all deleted. So we'll just go along and do this. So 1 is way up here in Greenland, so that would definitely be 1. 2 is kind of in the middle of the US right here. And so this doesn't really look like anything I see in the United States, but neither does this. But then if I go down here to 3, this is right in the middle of the Amazon. So this has got to be 3, which makes this 2. There are areas that actually look like this in the United States, just not, we don't spend much time there because we live elsewhere. So this is talking about primary factors that are determining climate. And so some of the factors are the latitude and the elevation. So remember, latitude is how far north or south you are, and elevation, how high things are. So the farther north or the farther south you're going to get, it will get colder on average, because remember, most of the energy from the sun is going to be averaging out to hit the equator. And then elevation also has to deal with how high above sea level something is. So like mountains have high elevation. And then the location of mountains and oceans also affect things. So you can see how in this right here, the forest. Sorry, my daughter's coming in. I can plug it in later. So here, these two might be easy to confuse, but the wind is coming over from. Hold on, give me a second. I'll plug this in. No, I will plug it. I need to do it. Oh. Keep it weird, Mama. Okay, I will. Okay, sorry. So the two of the desert is actually because there's mountains all along here on the west coast, and as the winds go over, the winds will have to go over the mountains, and we get that rain shadow effect in like the whole Nevada area, and so it's very desert-like. Now in the middle of South America, there's lots of rivers and rainforests and things like that, and part of that has to do with the different wind patterns on this continent versus up here. So here we have an example of this, and it says a low elevation. So we have this mountain. This is in Washington, so this is up, up here-ish. And we've got some mountains, and then there's like the Seattle area, and then there's more mountains, and then it's the eastern side of Washington is pretty flat. So we're looking for a low elevation, high precipitation area which is right here, and that's over here. And so this is close to the ocean. This is the ocean, right? This is the Pacific Ocean. So it's close to the Pacific Ocean, and then the rain shadow occurs because the air is mostly dry after it crosses the mountain. So after the air, so the air is going over this way, right? And it's gonna be raining, right? And as it rises, it's gonna cause rain, and so it's gonna be a little bit more dry here. And then, so there's a little bit of moisture here, but then as it goes over the next mountain range, right, any moisture that it had in the middle, it's going to, again, lose on the second mountain range. So by the time it does this twice, it's super dry over here. So there's very little, see, like this is annual precipitation, 12 inches. In the middle, there was 40 inches. Over here, it's 15 inches. So it drops down every time. Climate affects the local environment. So then this is talking about local environments. And so the climate is determining how hot or cold, the main aspects of the long-term weather. And so this 5 says match the climate listed on the left side with the environment described on the right. So a coastal climate would have lots of plant life, water, and sunlight. A high latitude climate, so that is, high latitude would be really far north of the equator, or south of the equator, I guess. So a high latitude climate would be cold with low amounts of sunlight and plant life, and a dry climate in a rain shadow would have hot summers, limited water. Remember that, like California over here, this is like in a rain shadow, or all of Nevada is like in a rain shadow because it goes over one mountain range and a second whole mountain range. So then this one I just asked you to describe climate patterns in California. So I talked about this in the previous lesson quite a bit. So it gives you this map that's sorted into the different climate areas, and so you can pick one and describe it. You don't have to make a poster. All right, and then so this one right here, analyzing a climate problem. This is, remember, you're using these tables, and so it's saying we need to figure out what is, we're in a desert climate and it's really hot, and so what's the solution? We're using a decision matrix, and remember that with a decision matrix, you give more points to the thing that's doing better, right? It's not 1 is first place and 5 is the best, 1 is the worst. And so over here it says these are the criteria we care about: that it's not expensive, that it's easy to maintain, and that it's comfortable. And they're rating them here 1 to 5 on which is most important. So you can see that the most important thing is that it's comfortable temperatures. The second most important thing, which is kind of medium importance because it's a 3 out of 5, is not expensive. And the least important thing is that it's easy to maintain. And then so we have these different solutions: shade, and then they each have a rating of 2, right? It's pretty inexpensive, unless you had to like buy a tree or something like that and plant it. It's pretty easy to maintain, but it's not super comfortable, so it gets only a 2. So that's 6. Right? Air conditioners, super comfortable, very expensive. So it's a low rating here because it's expensive. It's not expensive, it's very expensive, so it's a 1. And it's a medium to maintain. So this is 8 points total. Right? A swimming pool is 4 points total because it's okay comfortableness, but it's super difficult to maintain, and it's very expensive. So that's low scores for that. And then the fan is kind of in the middle with a score of 7. And says, what is the best solution for the problem? What's the biggest trade-off? So I would say the best solution, I'm going to say best solution is the air conditioner. That's because the air conditioner has the highest rating in comfortable temps. Sorry, I'm trying to write and talk at the same time, which is the most important. So you can see how it has a 5, right? And the comfortable temperature was the most important thing here, and at a 5, and the air conditioner has the highest rating as a 5. The rest of them are 2s, which are pretty low. So that's the first thing you'd want to look at. And the second thing you'd want to look at is what's the next most important thing, that it's not expensive. Now, the air conditioner is the least, it does rate really low on that, but so does pretty much everything else, right? Like the swimming pool is about the same rating. The shade is just barely less expensive. The fan is really less expensive, but it's also not hardly comfortable at all. So the biggest trade-off is that it is really expensive. So that's the biggest trade-off, because yeah, it is going to be really comfortable, which is really what you want ultimately, but it's pretty expensive. Okay. So this is look at the California regional maps and California land cover type maps. What questions do you have about how the two maps are related? I'm not going to talk about this because you're thinking of your own questions. How are these maps related? So you're going to look at this map right here. This is the land cover types, right? It says California land cover types. It's down here. And this is showing you, this might look similar to like a satellite image that you could see, where like all this green area would be trees. This, this yellow beigeish area is shrubs and grass. We live up, most of us are up in here, this area, and so you can see how it's a mix of the purple, which is the cities and the towns, right, and the shrubs and grass. A lot of times when we go outside of the town, there's not really necessarily forest and woods unless we drive up the highway, closer to Tahoe. It's definitely not desert, but a lot of times we get out to either the farmlands or it's like shrubbery. And we're going to compare this map with this one up here, actually, of the climates, and see what looks similar between the two. They look pretty similar with different colors, but you can see how the different climates and these things kind of match up. And then with this one, you can just pick a cover type and say what climate might occur in an area, because we don't have partners. All right, and now this one says there are trade-offs when populations develop special traits to live in an environment. So this is asking us to present a poster that explains the trade-offs of an organism that's well suited to its environment. So let's see. And it gives some examples. Now, up here in this reading, it's talking about how, here it's talking about how plants can only live in a specific climate. And this is even true if you go to the store and you buy plants, it'll tell you it needs this much light, it has to be planted in this. And if you don't follow those directions, a lot of times it will die. Because if you go to some place like Green Acres, you can pretty much buy any type of plant there. But because of where we live, you're going to have to make sure that the plants are always in the shade or whatever, because a plant that lives in a forest environment like this, right, you can't just take that plant and then plant it in the desert and it will survive. It's not adapted to that environment. And then it talks here about how plant communities also influence animal communities. So a lot of you have probably been, or maybe even at Slide Park, you saw there were lots of like salamanders when we were walking through the forest areas, or even banana slugs sometimes. Maybe not, it's Slide Park, but in redwood areas there's like banana slugs. And those are organisms that live kind of with these large trees, because the trees and stuff produce nutrients for them to live, and then those like banana slugs in particular also eat through the dirt and help the trees. And so it's kind of examples it's talking about here with koalas. And so as another example of a trade-off, one thing that I said was if you had a large plant, see like this plant in here, these are these large leafy fern plants. If you took a fern plant, right, fern plants have these big old leaves, and they have big leaves because they're on the forest floor, and so they need to be able to collect lots of sunlight that's coming through the trees, right? They're not high up in the trees, so it's very shady all the time, so they need big leaves to collect more sunlight. The trade-off with that is that they need lots of water. So you could not take that plant and put it here in the desert because, for one, there's no water, but also the leaves, since the leaves are so big that they're used to collecting sunlight in the shade all the time, they're probably also not very well adapted to being in harsh sunlight. So they would probably also burn, and you might have seen this at home sometimes if you take like an indoor plant and put it too close to the window or outside even during the summer, the leaves will just straight up burn because they're not used to being in that much light. Okay, we are skipping over this lab. You're more than welcome to do this on your own, but we're not asking everyone to do that because finding the supplies might be difficult. Then it has this evidence notebook down here. It says emperor penguins eat fish, squid, and other animals as they catch it in the ocean. Roadrunners eat lizards, insects, and other animals they catch in the brushes and grass. How does the climate where the birds live affect the plants and animal life? Record your evidence. So one thing I would say is, let me read this again without talking out loud. How does the climate where the birds live affect the plant and animal life and what the birds eat? Oh, so the roadrunners live in the desert, right? I'm going to just write points here. Runners live in the desert. So there are, it's dry, there isn't a lot of rain. Oh boy. It's dry, there isn't a lot of rain. So plants and animals need to survive in the heat and be able to scavenge for food. So I mean, without writing, so you don't have to see me write all of these things. They would, this might, some of the ways that it might affect the plant life is that the plants might be smaller, you know, they might be more like cactuses or something like that, so they can survive the heat. They might only grow seasonally, like in that picture, if we go way back up here. In the picture, you know, all the grasses in the background are dead, so maybe there's lots of types of grasses and shrubs that will grow maybe like in the spring, and then they'll die off and spread their seed everywhere for the next year. And the animals might be, they might be smaller, so they are, you know, a lot of times when you're in the desert, a lot of the life is like small. It's small insects, small rodents, because they can maybe live in the ground, or they might be nocturnal even. So now this talks about an orchid species, and this orchid often occurs in areas that gets more than 202. Where's my marker? Here we go. Right. Oh, that's a highlighter. Oops. Whatever. More than 203.2 centimeters of rain a year. So this, what information does this climate graph provide? How much precipitation does it receive annually? What is the average temperature in the area? Okay, so the average I'm not going to solve this math problem right here because I did it, but I can tell you how to do it. So it says the average temperature, and the temperature is in red. So the average temp ranges from, looks like about 15 degrees down here, maybe a little bit less, but I'm going to just say 15, to a little bit over 20. So about 15 to 20 degrees a month. I'll just say it's averaging a month. If you wanted to find the total average, you'd have to say, like, oh, let's say that this is 20, 21 plus 20 plus 19 plus maybe 17 plus 16 plus 15 plus 15. You can add them all up and divide them by 12. But we don't really need that information. So I'm just saying the average temperature per month is between 15 and 20. And the average rainfall, I'll fix this so you can see it later, a month is anywhere from, see down here in the June, July area, it's way down here. And remember, this is blue and the key for that is on the right. And so that's maybe 10 millimeters, right? Millimeters, I'm using millimeters. And then it goes way up here to this highest one is between 280 and 320, so maybe 300 millimeters. So it's anywhere from 10 millimeters to 300 millimeters a month. And is Darwin's orchid suited to the environment? I would say, now one thing it doesn't say is it just says more than 203 centimeters of rain per year. It doesn't say that it has to be per month or anything like that. And there's definitely 203 centimeters of rain every year because, I mean, look, in January, there's 300, oh, wait, no, sorry, this is centimeters, not millimeters, so we need 80 inches of rain a year. I'll use inches now because it's also those inches right here. So inches is about, let's say this is about 10, right? This is about 10 inches of rain, plus maybe, oh wait, no, sorry, this is 10. This would be like between 11 and 12. So let's just say 11 plus 10. So this is 20 plus, this would be maybe about 7. So 27. It doesn't look like we're going to get to 80 because then this is plus about 1, so, or maybe 2. So let's say 29, and then let's say this is another 2, so 31. And this is about 5 inches, so 36 inches, and then this is and about another 10, so maybe 46 inches. And then down here, this is all way low at about not even, so we're about 40, just guesstimating around here, adding up the inches per month on average, we're about 40, which is pretty far off from 80. So I would say that climate would not support the orchids because the area gets about 40 inches a year of rainfall, but the flower needs at least 80 inches. Okay. Okay, finally, exploration 3. So use the photo and your knowledge of seals to write a story about how the seal's trait helps it survive the environment. So the things that I know about seals and where it is living is it has a streamlined shape that helps it swim through the water fast. It has patterns on its skin, so that helps it to be camouflaged within the plants that it's living in, and it has a lot of fat to keep warm because it lives in the water. And so these are adaptations. An adaptation is something that helps an organism survive and reproduce in its environment. So this question says, leopards have spots that blend in with patches of sunlight on the jungle floor. How might this trait become more common in population of the leopards? And so it is B. So A says leopards get their spots by rubbing up against each other. That doesn't happen because, like, if this happened, then this would be true for any animals, right? And like, our eye color doesn't change because we high five someone, or dogs don't change color because they go bump into another dog. It doesn't work like that. And C, an adult leopard develops more spots during its lifetime in order to compete with other leopards. That would be like us being able to change our hair color or change our eye color at will just because we prefer one thing or the other, and we can't do that. They get them because blending in, right, blending into the environment more will help the leopard successfully hunt for food, and because it's their camouflage, and because they can successfully hunt for food, they're more likely to survive, and so they get to pass their traits on to the others. So a leopard with no spots and a leopard with a bunch of spots, one of them would obviously be able to survive a lot easier. So it would be able to also reproduce easier. And now we have physical adaptations and behavioral adaptations. Physical adaptations are adaptations like the spots, like are the spots on this giraffe. Things or like the actual shape of this stick bug. Those are things that are physical about them. And then there's also behavioral adaptations. Behavioral adaptations are things that organisms will do, such as hibernating, or like stick bugs don't move very much, because if they look like a stick but they're moving a lot, then they don't really look like a stick, right? So down here it says determine whether each adaptation is physical or behavioral. So koalas have fur on their rumps. Okay, this is physical. I don't even have to keep reading because it's talking about fur on them. That's not a behavioral thing. That's something physically about them. A possum plays dead. This is a weird word, but this is a possum. A possum plays dead, so it's playing dead. It's doing something. So this is behavioral. Coastal redwoods have shallow roots that extend to support the tree. This is physical. It's something about the tree. That's a physical thing. And then humpback whales migrate north. So they're doing something. So this is a behavioral thing, the migration. Okay, what adaptations do emperor penguins and roadrunners have? I'm not going to write this, but I will say it. So emperor penguins, right? Emperor penguins actually have a lot of adaptations similar to, you look at the emperor, go back up to the emperor penguin and kind of look at their body shape. They've got similar body shapes, right? Penguins have this streamlined shape because penguins swim and they hunt for fish. So they have this streamlined shape that helps them to swim through the water. They've got these big old flippers. They're kind of like flabby. They have blubber that keeps them warm when they're in those Arctic waters. And then they have like thick fur. And adaptations that the roadrunners have, we'll go way back up here. Roadrunners, sloths. So roadrunners have these different patterns on their, I guess it's not fur, it's probably like their feathers have particular patterns. It says up in here that roadrunners get rid of excess salt through glands near their eyes. So they actually have physical differences that help them conserve water by getting rid of salt. But they also, you look at the patterns in the background, and their feather patterns match it really well. So they've got this that as well. I mean, they also have long beaks that probably help them eat whatever their preferred insect is and stuff like that. Okay, now, and then it goes down to this case study of the Sierra Nevada, and this is a picture of the Ansel Adams Wilderness. This is over a little bit south of Yosemite, and these are all kind of animals that live and trees. These are some of the oldest trees in the world, actually, these bristlecone pines. and these are all in the Sierra Nevada mountains. And so this says pikas grow thick fur and their small bodies conserve heat. Kangaroo rats, these are pikas right here, American pikas. They look like little chipmunks, kind of. Kangaroo rats do not sweat, have oily fur that helps them conserve moisture. They get water from seeds. What would happen if a pika and a kangaroo rat switched environments? So what we know about pikas is they live in this environment, right? And you look at the pictures of this environment, it's up high, there's water, there's snow up here, so it gets pretty cold, I would say, at certain times of the year. There's plant life, they're obviously eating those things. And it says that they gather and store plants in a sheltered pile and eat them during the winter. So they're gathering plants to eat. Kangaroo rats don't sweat and have oily fur to help them conserve moisture. This sounds like they live in a desert environment because they're not sweating, which would lose moisture, and they have oily fur that helps them conserve moisture, and they're getting water from seeds. So you would probably get water from seeds if you didn't have water around. So if you put a pika where the rats live, they would quickly die because they wouldn't be able to find their food, which is like the plant life. Sorry, I'm trying to type and talk. They wouldn't be able to find their plant life, so they wouldn't be able to find food, and they would probably lose moisture easily because of their thick fur that keeps them warm. The rats would also die if they switched places because they wouldn't be able to find the seeds they eat, probably. They would also die from the cold because they have it says that they have the oily fur helps them conserve moisture, which is good for if it's hot, but oily fur is not going to help you stay warm. So they're going to get really cold. So those are some examples. And then this is talking down here. It starts talking about how things with similar adaptations, or creatures can have similar adaptations because they live in similar environments. So it talks about these spiders and these moles. Both, they don't have eyes. Actually, moles have eyes that are covered in skin, weirdly. And these spiders don't really have eyes. And that's because they both live in caves and where it's dark, so they don't need them. And so they're both very distantly, they're not similar organisms at all, spiders and moles, but they both don't have eyes. And so that's talking about why, because they live in similar environments, they both have created this adaptation where they don't need eyes. And it might seem silly that your eyes would disappear, but if you're not using them, then it's just a waste of energy. So they'll kind of evolve away. So this talks about a rubber tree has a smooth, thin bark and large, waxy leaves that allow rainwater to run off of this tree faster, or the leaves of this tree faster. Which organism below is most likely to live in a similar environment? And the trick here is this says waxy leaves, right? And so down here we see that the giant water lilies with waxy leaves. We don't know where any of these things live, but right, we're talking about how similar adaptations can occur. So this tree has waxy leaves. These lilies have waxy leaves. So it seems like these two things could be in the same environment because they both have a similar trait. Okay, then we're sorting these word banks into suitable environments, and then this is it. Long video today, sorry. This is 2 days worth though. So the tundra would be a white winter coat, would be in the tundra. Migration I actually know that things from both migration occurs with organisms in both. There are things that will migrate to and from the desert depending on the year and the tundra, like penguins oftentimes will go to certain areas of the year. Active at night, that would be a desert thing. You would not be active at night in the tundra because it would be the coldest time, and so you would probably not be doing anything during the night in the tundra, but the desert, it's the coldest time as well, so it's a good time to be active. Shallow roots in both. It describes that a little up here with the low-growing plants with shallow roots in the tundra. And also we know that from studying the desert before, so in both places there's shallow roots. Thin fur would definitely be a desert trait because it would help you stay cool if you had thin fur. If you had thin fur in the tundra, you would freeze. Spines, not leaves. Spines is a desert thing. And that's because the spines usually are harder. They hold in the moisture better for deserts. And hibernation is, I would say, is a tundra thing. A lot of times in the coldest times of the year, animals will hibernate. This does happen in other places. I'm not really sure that actually happens in the desert, though. I know that things will hibernate in other, not just the tundra, but deserts. Deserts are pretty similar types of weather year-round, and so usually hibernation with animals is when there are like different seasons, and they'll hibernate through particular seasons. So there we go. We went through all 2 days of lesson